Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Finance and Capital Management Committee meeting of March 17th, 2025. I am Barbara Sykes, the chair of the Finance and Capital Management Committee meeting. Joining me today are Member Molinar and Member Harrison. Also, we have our Superintendent Robertson, and we will be joined by additional administration members as we go through the agenda. I would just ask that for your first time when you speak, if you would introduce yourself as we go through the meeting, then that would make it easier for the public and all of us to remember who each one of us are. So first and foremost, most important today, happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope everyone enjoy the day, have fun, and be careful out there. So let me start off with, can I please ask if one of our members would move to approve the previous minutes from the meeting?
So moved.
There is a motion, and can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Molinar. So the members, all those in favor, say indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, so the minutes have been approved. So we have a pretty full agenda today. So we'll start with you, our treasurer. If we could go over, I see here on the agenda that we first have the updates on Pfeiffer, but what I would like to do, if I could go over quickly, our finance reports first. Yes, I want to do that real quickly first.
So, thank you, Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Robinson, and Ms. Carter. But
would you introduce yourself, please, Mrs. Treasurer?
Yes. I'm Steve Thompson. I'm the treasurer.
Thank you.
So year to date, so if you look at a couple of pages, and I'll cover this again at our board meeting next week, but the important part here is that things have taken a bit of a turn in a positive way. As you can see, year to date, so what we do in this report is we're comparing year to date, month to month, and year over year. So, and then we compare that to the trends that are in our forecast. So this is really a document to let us know how accurate, as our forecast currently stands, is it with where we stand at this point in the school year. And we're halfway through, so I'm starting to get a little more confidence in what we read on the month-to-month reports. So our our second tax payments came in, and our revenue's pretty close to $1 million more than is on our forecast, and our expenditures are coming in better and making a positive move, as well as we're at $2.5 million less or favorable than what we were originally trending. So we've had a pretty significant turn in terms of how much revenues come in versus how that compares to our forecast. So unfortunately, I'm going to shed some more troubling news down the road here a little bit in our presentation today, but from our monthly forecast, we're projecting to be about $3.4 million more than we anticipated on our forecast. But one of the things that I think gets consistently confused, and want to make sure we understand, that we are in deficit spending overall, cutting into our cash reserves, but fortunately, we are a little less cutting into our cash reserves than anticipated. And I could just quickly go through these next two slides and let them finish all the way through. Here's the difficulty. So what you're looking at with all this jumble of numbers, this is what our state funding currently looks like in House Bill 96. So if the percentages in rolling in or phasing in the Fair School Funding Act stay as they are. That's not the challenge. The challenge, again, is that word we're going to hear over and over and over again is inputs. And those inputs are what drive the decision making and what it costs to educate a student. And they're still seemingly very set on using 2022 inputs, which doesn't account for the inflation over the last 3 years of educating a student. So what is the impact? If you look at state aid, where those red numbers are, just going straight across, those numbers represent like $6,186,000 in 2026, next fiscal year. That's how much, plus the $541,555 restricted state grant and aids, is what we would lose in state funding. Now, that's based on the formula. So if you transpose that out all the way across, can you hit the button one more time, one more advance? Look at that top number, puts them together. So across the top, it adds together the grants, unrestricted and restricted, and that's each year the amount of state funding that we lose in the current, as the current House bill is written. So I know there are people heading to Columbus tomorrow to speak with legislators. We need to make sure that we do all that we can to try and press for updated inputs. That's what we need. The funding formula, leave it as it is. It's fine. Just move us to 2024, 2025 inputs, not 2022 inputs, and these numbers would drastically change. But I wanted to model this for you so that you get a grasp on what we're facing. So even though our year is coming together better than anticipated, better than forecasted, it gets basically all taken away from this new, from this proposed new funding bill, House Bill 96. Next slide. Another challenge that we have right now, and I thought this graph showed it the best, this is talking about our insurance rate increases. So all insurance rate increases are absorbed contractually by the district and not by employees. So what we projected based on our experts and our consultants, working with our consultants, was 5.5% increase. That's what we anticipated for this school year. So what you're looking at under July, August, September, October, November, and December, those are the latest numbers that I have. That is the percent that exceeds, in most cases, exceeds what we had budgeted. So right now, if you look clear to the right, that last green indicator is 17%, which is our overall what we're averaging right now, over and above what we forecasted. So that translates into a couple $1 million. So really, if this House bill comes through like it is currently written, rates don't change, it's going to put a tremendous amount of pressure on our 5-year forecast and coming anywhere near hitting it. So I would say at this point, if it stays the way that it is, you're going to hear a presentation today about a little over $10 million in cuts that are proposed. We would need to hold those cuts and probably add somewhere around $10 million more in additional cuts on top of the current cuts. So if we don't, we'll have a hard time making it. As this stands right now, we would have a difficult time in getting to the 4th year for that presidential election to be back on the ballot. We'd have a hard time maintaining a 4-year cycle. Any questions I can answer?
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Are there any questions from the members of the committee? Any questions from the members of the committee? No questions from the member of the committee. No question for me. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Treasurer. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to go right back to our scheduled agenda, and that would be the updates on Pfeiffer and Miller South. I would ask that you come forward, that you would keep your comments close to your chest, concise, and beginning by introducing yourself, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair,
Good evening.
Board, Treasurer Thompson, Dr. Robinson. I'm introducing Dana Mitchell and Zachary Forney from Prime AE, here to talk about and explain a little bit about where we are in the process of
And which
designing
one
the
is Dana
school.
Mitchell?
I'm sorry.
I'm Dana Mitchell.
Thank you.
I'm Zach Forney.
Okay. So are we beginning with you, Mr. Mitchell?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's go.
Good afternoon. We're here to kind of give you an update on where we are with the development of the new K-8 school in the Kenmore, at the old Kenmore site, merger of Miller South and Pfeiffer. Everybody, I think, is aware of the project that we're working on. And I won't get into the capacities, but we're looking at somewhere around a 700-student school. Where we are schedule-wise, we started design activities late last summer as the school year started. That included meeting with the teachers and the staff to understand from a programmatic standpoint where we are. But we also initiated the abatement and demolition of the existing school at this time. So we took bids for those. Projects is underway. That demolition activity will start here in the spring and be concluded sometime midsummer. At the same time, we have initiated our design activities, and Mr. Forney will kind of give you a little flavor, a splash of what the design of the building looks like. We also were able to secure and procure a construction manager at risk. We had a meeting with him last week to kick off those activities. And basically what we're looking at are 3 packages for design and construction activity. It'd be a site package, an early foundation package, and then the main building design and construction package. From a programming standpoint, we spent a lot of time talking with the teachers and faculty and the administration to understand what their needs are. We converted that into a building program that was then converted, and Zach will show you what the design of that looks like. From a site planning standpoint, one of the things that we looked at was where to place the new building. And with the existing building coming down, and we also discovered that there was a fairly significant sewer line that ran underneath the existing parking lot and the building, and the foundations that are in place for the existing building that go very deep into that hill. We elected not to reconstruct the building anywhere near the original site of where the building exists, and we plan on building it in the parking lot to the west. You can see this is what the storm sewer looked like. Some of it dates back into the 1910s for some of that sewer line. We did meet with the city and discussed it, and everybody felt it was very prudent of us not to try to build that building on the hill over top the sewer line there. This is a preliminary site plan of what the building will look like and where it will be located, parking, play area, and then the building itself.
I'm Zach Forney.
Okay.
So this looks at the floor plans for the new building. We have the first floor plan on the right that has our, across the center of the building is the sort of spine that has the cafeteria as well as the welcome kind of open spaces. To the north will be the Miller South side of the school, and on the south will be the Pfeiffer Elementary side. And you also see that there is actually I can point with this. No, I can't. Cool. We have the theater seating up there as well, with a 1,000-seat theater for Miller South, and then the gym down on the south side of the building. Also up above, we see those double height spaces. So everywhere at the is the sort of taller spaces. And you can see that you can walk around that cafeteria space, creating this nice grand entry as we get into the space. So here is an exterior shot of the building, sort of looking at what we're designing. So down the middle is the glass area, so it's going to be a light, sort of a beacon for the neighborhood, as well as the north and the south side being more just brick, solid, sort of a school building, so that we're not just throwing something crazy into this neighborhood, that we're actually respecting the local architecture. We also have the green space. Also, there's a lot of slope, topography.
Sorry.
There's a lot of topography on this site, so we'll see headed up on the top side where we have all the play spaces kind of going down to the building. This is looking at the space inside on the Miller South side. So up in one of the PBLA spaces. Up on the second floor, we have a lot of sort of community learning. So teachers can bring their students out there. There's a lot of place for collaboration to happen. If you're familiar with Miller South, they do a lot of collaborative projects. So we want to make sure that we're creating an environment that's conducive to that.
One more.
Okay. This is the cafeteria space we're talking about. So straight ahead is the entry of the building. So when you come in, you would see this whole room, and this is looking at it from the actual kitchen, walking into the cafeteria space. This will also serve as a holding space for the 1,000-seat theater for when Miller South has their productions. People will be able to go into the right where the theater is. And we have this big, very well lit with natural lighting, which is something that's not currently in the Kenmore building, really opening this place up and just creating a welcoming environment for that. And thank you.
Does that conclude your presentation?
That concludes our presentation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the committee members?
I have one. Parking.
Getting rid of the parking, where you put it. Yeah.
What's the parking capacity?
We go ahead. I'll go back. We have the capacity to, let's see. So down the center, where we have the drop-off, pulling people off of Battles down into the site, that's enough parking to handle all of the staff, faculty, and staff and faculty for the building. About 85 spaces, 85, 90. And then up at the northeast of the site, we have a parking space up there as well. And that is to catch the overflow for the, the larger events. So when they do have this, a large musical or something, people from the community can come park there. We also met with the city zoning, and they said that it's nice to be able to use all of the on-site parking as well. So we're not just replacing this huge parking lot for the high schoolers that's currently there with more sort of pavement. We're actually having more green space and using the surrounding parking to really contribute to this.
So how many parking spaces will the school have?
About 150 to 160.
Okay,
And then,
thank you.
Then the rest will be taken with off-street parking in the surrounding neighborhood.
Thank you.
Member Molinar?
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. The first question I have is, are these plans available to maybe on the website or somewhere like that for community members who maybe weren't participating in some of the planning things to be able to go through and look forward to this? Or
They're not currently available?
Yeah, not yet. We intend on having a second, or not, this will be the third community meeting as we get further developed here in the spring. So we will have another community meeting shortly before school.
Member Molinar?
Thanks. And then this looks beautiful from the couple of minutes that I've seen from it. So I'm going to ask, is this within our budget?
We will let you know in a couple of weeks. We just engaged with the contractor, the CMR, the contractor that's been retained. They are currently working on budgets. And rest assured that whatever budgets come, we will work together to make sure it stays within. We're desperately working on finding that answer to your question.
Any additional questions? Thank you. Thank you, Member Molinar, and thank you, Member Harrison. So with the community, what was the participation numbers approximately with the community meeting?
I don't know if we have the numbers on that, but it was very well attended. So we've done most of our meetings, either meeting one-on-one with the principals, meeting with the students, surveying students, as well as going to Ward 9. Tina's been great in helping out there. and being able to get in front of everybody and have them do a lot of interaction. So our second time meeting with the community at the community center, we had plans, ideas of what we're going to be doing, and then had everybody come through and say, this works, this doesn't work, this is what we want, we hate this. So we got a lot of feedback. There are a lot of pictures of people older than me, kids as young as my kids out there telling us what they wanted. So we got a lot of good feedback from that. And there were also online surveys people were participating in, and there were also physical copies at the community center for people to engage with us.
Okay, and just to follow up with Member Molinar, how soon can you put these out so that they can be seen by the community, even though it's wonderful that the Kenmore community has been involved, but this is a Akron Public School project, and this community is moving from one part of the community to another part, so we want all of the community to be involved in this.
Sure.
Yeah.
And one way is to have it up on the website so everyone can see.
So you ask an excellent question, because we
course.
asked for this audience to make sure you guys saw it before it went anywhere else. So I'll defer to the superintendent and Mr. Keenan to let us know how you guys want us to convey this information. We didn't want to do anything without the board at least having put eyes on this.
We appreciate that.
Yep.
So, Mr. Superintendent, did you have a thought on how soon you would like to see that posted out to the community?
So we're going to work with the architectural firm and Mr. Keenan. As soon as we can get it put out there, then we will have it put out there within the next couple of weeks. So, but I'll talk with them in terms of anything that needs to be done, providing some space on the website and where we want to put it, hopefully at the top where people will be able to see it and recognize it. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. That would be great. Also, it would be great because I just heard you say, Mr. Mitchell, that you're still working to find out if this is within budget. So again, if this is a project that we're going to say to the community that this is a bit over budget, then again, that means additional tax dollars. So we want everyone to feel good about this, to be in on it, to feel a part of it, and feel that they have some ownership with this particular school. So thank you so much for your presentation. If there's no more additional questions, Mr. Treasurer, you have a comment?
Just a question, if I could.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. Have you guys had a chance to do any kind of boring samples to know what our soils are looking like? Mm-hmm. Could you give us a brief update on that?
Yeah, so we've looked all over the site, and predominantly on the western side where the building actually going. They've done test pits, they've done boring holes, and there were some buildings there originally, so houses. It was a residential neighborhood. And when they demolished those houses, they kind of just pushed all the rubble into the basement. So we have some not so great fill in a few of the locations where the houses were back in the 20s, but that's, probably the best soil we have on the site. Speaking with the geotechnical engineer, they had said that there are a few ways to move forward with it. One is, using geopiers and sort of going at a mid depth, and I think that's the best way to do it because we don't want to come through and clear the entire site, have to get rid of all of that fill and bring in new fill. So we're going to kind of use what's there and kind of just dig a bit deeper. So nothing as intrusive or extensive as what's on the east side of the site, where there are 40-foot piers and all sorts of fun stuff.
On that side.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. One final question. Are we on schedule?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we are.
We actually have accelerated a lot of the design and construction activities to make sure that we're going to hit the summer of '27. So as I mentioned earlier, there are 3 bid packaging, and that'll allow us to start construction as early as this summer when it's dry out for site work, and then get into the foundations before winter, and then start the building, in earnest this time next year. That'll give them almost 18 months of construction.
Okay, great. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right, thank
Keep
you.
us updated. Thank you. All right, we have completed the 2.02, which was our budget finance monthly report. We'll move on to 2.03, which is the proposed budget reduction changes. That would be Dr. Robertson and Mrs. Carter.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Sykes, Madam Chair, Pastor Harrison, Dr. Molinar, Dr. Thompson, Treasurer. I'm Dr. Robinson, the Superintendent of Schools. We're going to get right into the presentation. Some things we're going to bypass for today as we talk about mission, vision, all those things, but we will, in our larger presentation, we'll capture those things. Also, being a part of this work, which has been very collaborative, is going to be Mr. Keenan and also Dr. Hodo, who I asked to work along with us to ensure that we were able to find creative and innovative ways to look at this as compared to the way we initially started looking at it, so that we look at a lot of the operational ways that we can find reductions, which would help us in the long run in terms of preventing an enormous amount of rifts and reductions and loss in staff. And so the objective here is to achieve sustainable, optimized operational efficiency through strategic restructuring. We must align the district's 5-year forecast and strategic priorities to our blueprint for excellence, our strategic plan, while maintaining a focus on student achievement and maintaining also educational excellence.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. My name is Angela Carter. I am Chief of Staff, and I am going to continue on with the presentation. So good afternoon, board.
Good afternoon.
This presentation details our plan to achieve the $10.2 million in budget reduction. And so we're going to we examined both personnel cost, focusing on right-sizing our organization, and operating expenses, seeking efficiency gains. So please be aware that contractual agreement limits our ability to make certain reductions, but we were able to look at reductions as it relates to our operational expenses and personnel. Our team has worked extensively with identifying budget reductions. Our team, as it relates to our administration, building administrators, district administrators, and our senior leadership team. And so we looked to see how we could move more efficiently in managing our resources. Mr. Keenan, Director of Facilities, has worked really hard with identifying cost reduction opportunities on the operational side, along with Dr. Hodo and other members of our team. There are a variety of strategies to save cost or reduce cost. And 2 strategies used during the review of operational expenses are cost reduction and cost avoidance. And I'm going to have Mr. Keenan come up and share a little bit about cost reduction and cost avoidance.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Robinson, and Stephen Keenan, Director of Facilities. As Ms. Carter mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about cost reduction and cost avoidance. Both items were looked at extensively in creating efficiencies throughout our operating side of the district, or at least my focus was on the operations side and not on personnel. So first, the cost reduction was taking a look at our existing contracts and what we are spending money on now and finding ways that we could reduce those expenses. Some of that was for just taking a hard look at inventory control and what supplies we were using and seeing where we could reduce our usage and therefore our spendage. And the other aspect of it was looking at our current existing contracts and reaching out to the stakeholders in those contracts and attempting to negotiate different terms in those contracts. And in many cases, we were successful in doing so. The next would be cost avoidance, taking a kind of a more longer-term look to see how we can change operations or make some changes in the district to avoid certain costs coming down the road. And that, too, would include some contracts. So instead of also renegotiating or looking at current contracts and seeing if we can renew them or renegotiate them for a new term that would be more in our favor and then avoid additional costs through that.
And so this slide here is an overall.
Excuse me, Mrs. Carter.
Yes.
Before you go any further, Director Keenan. So are we going to see any numbers?
An overall view of numbers, yes. Those are coming in a few slides from now.
Okay, all right.
Now, the next slide. The next slide provides an overall view of 5 key areas we've targeted in order to reduce district operating expenses as it relates to what Mr. Keenan was just referring to as it relates to cost reductions and cost avoidance. And he's going to now share some examples of the budget reduction and some of the things that took place with looking at finding reductions in operational expenses.
Okay, I'll just start with going through 1 through 5, keep them in order. So first, an area is in energy costs. One initiative that was actually started last summer that myself and the HVAC/energy management department really focused on was our peak load response system. And what the peak load response is when there's a heavy load on the electrical grid in the summer, our energy capacity provider asks if we can reduce energy usage at any of our buildings. And we have 30 of our buildings in that program. And during those voluntary times when we were able to, based on who was in the building or who was not in the building, we reduced power and voluntarily joined that peak load response. And that total ended up saving us roughly $420,000 in the upcoming fiscal year, 2 fiscal years for that. Next would be asset management, supply management, taking a look at our fleet and seeing if there are areas that we can reduce our fleet or reduce the amount of equipment we have or the amount of supplies that we have on hand, and take a longer term look to see better analyze replacement needs and when can we extend the times in which we own what we have and versus when we need to replace it. Second is sourcing, determining whether we're doing work in-house or outsourcing. There's many variables, and there have been some cases where it has been less expensive to outsource certain work based on what equipment we have available and what our labor hours are available to us are, and other times reevaluating some contracts with outside vendors to determine that we can actually do some of this work, absorb some of that work in-house and therefore cancel that contract. Number 4, taking a hard look at overtime and putting in some more rigorous standards and practices in how overtime is distributed, how it is approved or requested, and taking a hard look at whether it's really needed. Can we change work schedules to accommodate those needs without having to increase the amount of overtime, as well as seeing what is being done in overtime, can we redistribute that work to happen elsewhere? 5th is sustainability. One of the major opportunities that we had is our waste and recycling contract ends at the end of this fiscal year, And through research and working with other organizations and finally landing through OSC, being able to save roughly 1/3 of our normal budgeted amount for waste and recycling with a new contract going through OSC.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. This is a slide that shows the breakdown by division of reductions for operational expenses. So under academics, as it relates to operational expenses, we're reducing by $733,572. Under operations, which includes human capital, technology, facilities, maintenance, custodial, looking at energy, like Mr. Keenan was just saying, like the spectrum, internet service, we'll be saving $50,000, $10,000 over 5 years. Individually, that's just getting a new contract with Spectrum, so that's just an example. You'll see that in the upcoming board meeting, actually. And so under operations, it's $2,987,134.04. And then for student services and supports, we're saving $754,000. This slide here shows a little bit by department. We've identified roughly 4.5 million, if you round it up, reduction in operating expenses as we move forward. And these budget reductions were vetted by our Treasurer's Department, working with Dr. Thompson and other members within the Treasurer's Department. We've met several times looking at our reductions, making sure that this is something that will work as it relates to the 5-year forecast. And so we're going to continue to work closely with Dr. Thompson and his team as it relates to our reductions as we continue to move forward this year and next year and so on. So now we're going to look at the plan for personnel. And so we'll start here on the left. We're proposing a reduction in force to eliminate redundant roles and create a leaner, more efficient organization. Importantly, this reduction is based on structure, not individual performance. So when we do a reduction in force, we're looking at efficiency, we're looking at our needs, we're looking at what is it that we need to have, what personnel do we need to have to make sure that we're operating efficiently throughout the district within each division and each department. We want to make sure that there's long-term stability. And so we are using a 2-stage approach. So if you look on the right, we're implementing a rigorous review and justification process for all future role replacements, whether due to voluntary or involuntary departures, to ensure controlled staffing and alignment with district revenue. In other words, replacement of staff will need to be justified and approved by human capital and the superintendent. On this slide, I want to talk you through the 5-step process we engaged to redesign the organizational structure. So we'll start out by analyzing the existing structure by identifying areas with potential for consolidation. That's number 1 on your left, top left. If you go down, number 2, we next identified roles that we could remove or combine to improve productivity while eliminating bureaucracy. Number 3, down on the bottom right, we looked at opportunities to redistribute tasks from potentially eliminated positions to remaining employees with those that we can do that with. If you look up to number 4, right above number 3, spans of control. From there, we looked at how many FTEs, which is full-time employees, managers, and supervisors, are overseeing within the department. And then number 5, that's the top right. We put this work in front of our attorney to ensure that we're adhering to collective bargaining units. The next slide is going to show you a breakdown by division of reductions. For academics, it's about 2.0 million. Communications, 85,000. Operations, 2.6 million. Schools and accountability, 542,000. Student services and support, 276,000. And division of talent and organizational development, 147,000. And then this is just a breakdown by department. You can just see just the distribution. Next, as I said earlier, as it relates to needing to justify replacements and look at position control, this is an example of how we're going to be doing that. This slide lays out the process for controlling staffing levels after our proposed reduction in force. So replacements to staff are almost perceived as automatic to hiring for some. Just because it became automatically vacant doesn't mean that we're going to automatically fill it. Now we have to go through position control, and managers and supervisors and directors have to enter a request. And so they'll have to justify vacancies, justify filling a vacancy, being able to explain the workload, the strategic alignment with our blueprint, let us know if it's new, and the impact expected from the role. And so staffing requisitions require approval from division directors, human capital, and the superintendent. It also flows through the treasurer's department as well. We will measure the effectiveness of this process using KPIs such as wage cost percentage of revenue, headcount reductions, and attrition rates. When we consider the framework we deployed, we have a plan to reduce our budget by 10.2 million. This plan has been vetted again by our Treasurer's Department, Dr. Thompson and his team, and prepared with input and ideas from the executive leadership as well as building leadership. We've identified savings within our personnel, about 5.8 million, and also savings in our operational efficiencies, around 4.4 million. The next slide is a timeline that will show our progress and where we are now and where we are going. And so we've been working on this framework now for the last few months. With Finance Committee approval, we plan to provide union notification of the reduction in force within the next couple of weeks, and pre-notification to affected employees at least by April 1st, and then a community update regarding this plan. Our intent and our plan is to present on April 14th, at the April 14th board meeting. This concludes our presentation for the reduction plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter. Appreciate that. I would just simply say that it just take, we all come from different places and have different experiences. And so from my experience, when I look at a finance committee meeting, I tend to like to hear about numbers all of the time because it's a finance committee meeting. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate you telling us the process that you've gone through. So as we go through this process again, then the next time I know we'll just get right into the numbers.
Correct. The next meeting will be more detailed because we'll be able to do it at the next meeting. Yes,
great.
ma'am.
We'll get right into the numbers. So let me start off by asking the members of the committee if you have any questions.
I have a couple.
Member Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will say first to you, Madam Chair, I really don't know more than I knew from reading the email that we received. I do want to address cost reduction for a second. And I see that Ms. Folk is here. I do remember hearing last year that we have buses that's more than 10 years old. I think the standard was 10 years or 12. So we have to replace buses. And so when I look at the cost reduction, there are some things that we won't be able to reduce. We're also looking at better access to CLCs, and so I don't know if we have factored that into our cost reduction. When we're looking at building uses, we're going to incur, hopefully, more access to buildings is going to incur more costs. I would like to see numbers of people, places, and things. That is something that is missing for me. Listening to the staff members come into the last meeting, I think we need to present something more than what we just got.
Okay, so thank you, Member Harrison. So first you were asking about buses, if there is a plan within any of this to replace buses, and secondly, you were asking about any additional costs considered for the uses of the community learning centers.
So I could do the community learning centers piece. So that's one of the areas where we do accrue overtime. And so that has been taken in consideration as we're looking at reducing overtime that we can control. We want to make sure that structures are in place to control the overtime and making sure that it's justified, as Mr. Keenan stated earlier. But then there is some overtime that we won't be able to control due to the use of our CLCs, because the district takes on the majority of that cost.
Member Molinar?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, the buses.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Robinson.
The buses.
Yes. So this year, you're not going to see anything about buses being added in here. We are certainly off cycle and have been for the last few years. We do know that within the next year or two that we will have to begin to start replacing buses again. And when that happens over 26, 27, 27, 28, we would be able to start budgeting for the replacement of 2 buses each year, which would be a total of 4 over the course of those 2 years. We won't have to do anything for this upcoming school year. It's not that we don't need to, but we are able to sort of push it to 26, 27. 26, 27, and 27, 28. And we'll probably have to be doing a cycle beyond that as well. Every year, probably looking at 1 to 2 buses just to be able to catch ourselves back up. Putting ourselves back on a cycle like we had some years ago, that's going to be really difficult for us to do at one time. But we do plan to budget for that in the upcoming year, not this 25-26 school year, but 26-27, which will be the next year out, and then the following one, we'll be buying two more additional buses.
Okay, thank you. Member Molinar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, this is the first that I have seen this presentation, and I do plan to really review this because you outlined your plans and your processes so much. Will you be able to add this presentation to board docs for us to review after this meeting?
It won't be after this meeting, but yes, it will be available. I mean, we will provide it for the board members, yes.
Okay.
Because we're going to go back and make some changes ourselves.
Okay, so approximately, when do you plan to have this ready for the board to be able to review?
The end of the week.
The end of the week?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I would like to understand, thank you, I'd like to understand the process and appreciate
Absolutely.
the process, because I'm taking it all in at once here. But in this, I wasn't sure, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 slides back.
Oh, just tell me when.
Oh, that one was good. The one with numbers on it. Thank you. So on this side, it does look like we have $3 million from academics. Are these planned to be classroom, or do we know?
A lot of it is through, the majority of it is through attrition.
Is it classroom attrition?
Not all of it.
Not all of it. Okay. And then I guess as Member Harrison noted, I think what would be very helpful to me, the numbers here are nice, but maybe additional numbers to let me know what these represent, about how many positions and from where does this represent. And then the other question, I saw that this was about a little under $3 million from operations, and it looked like on the other presentation it was another $3 million just from operations. And I think my question about the, or is 4.4 million, 4.5 million from operations. Are those single or recurring savings?
It's a little bit of both. It's a mixture of both. So I'm going to have either Dr. Thompson or Mr. Keenan speak to that.
All right, so Mr. Keaton, could you also come up, Dr. Thompson?
So you understand how we're doing
Yeah.
it from the finance department. So what we will do is there are some of these cuts that are compounding, meaning year over year over year over year. And there are some of these cuts that are one-time cuts, or maybe there's a few that are even 2-year cuts. So what we've done is just we've done the math to distribute that. Let's say it's $1 million one-time expenditure. We're going to spread that. It's not a million. It's going to be 250,000, 250,000, 250,000, 250,000. Because that's not exactly how it'll break down, but it is how it'll impact the end of a 5-year forecast. So we're monitoring those, and we've asked for some controls and ways to measure certain things, and I know they're developing those currently, so that, for example, the reduction in overtime is a difficult one to hit. It can be. It's certainly the money's there, but it needs to be closely monitored. So they developed a system for that, and before we finalize it in that May forecast, we're going to need to see that we're actually hitting that 30% reduction trend. And we'll be able to measure that, whether that's successful or not, prior to the May 5-year forecast.
Okay, thank you. Member Molinar, did you have a follow-up?
Sorry, thanks. And my last question in understanding the processing of this, you mentioned on the slide, I think today was a green star, maybe for St. Patty's Day. I think there's another one of where we are with this now.
Oh, our timeline.
Here we go. Yes, thank you.
Timeline.
So to help me understand, you said that you have already started to gather input from the bargaining units of the community,
we'll now, after today's meeting is when we're going to schedule our meetings over the next 2 weeks. And because we need to meet with them and go through this with the unions that are impacted. And then after that, we will do a pre-notice to any staff that may be impacted by the reductions. And then on the 14th, we'll have the actual, we'll be able to then let you know who will be impacted. But per our agreements, we need to meet with the staff, with our unions first.
So before we know who, sorry, thank you, before we know who necessarily, does that need to happen before we know how many? Before the board knows how many positions?
We could tell you how many are planned before we, as it relates to where we are right now, but then we'll finalize things once we meet with our union leadership. But we can tell you the numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Keenan, did you have your question answered, or is there something else Mr. Keenan can add to this?
I think the treasurer has.
Okay, I think the treasurer's answered it. Thank you, Mr. Keenan.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions? If there are not, let me just say this, in that the five-year forecast, I believe, included this school year. And so what I'm hearing is that we have not made any of these, we have made some of these reductions, so we have not made, for sure, we have not made any of the reductions in staff. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not unless it was through attrition.
Okay.
Yeah. And much.
So
of
we
that-
did have one RIF this current school year, but the majority of them will happen at the April 14th, as relates to staff, ma'am.
Okay, so that will happen April 14th, which means that this will probably be effective our next school year, our
Correct.
next school term.
Yes.
So my concern with you, Mr. Treasurer, would be, so how does that affect our five-year plan? Since my thought was that with the five-year plan, that we start making those reductions in the first of the 5 years, and I don't see that that has happened. So how is that going to affect the forecasting?
Thank you, Madam President. I think at this point, the reductions that what it looked like specifically in November looks different than what it looks like now.
Yep.
From my vantage point, as long as we ensure that all the cuts are made that were supposed to be made for the rest of this fiscal year, which there weren't a lot of them, but that those are implemented,
Okay.
coupled with what we're projecting, as long as our projections come through and everything's instituted in a timely fashion, then we should have very little impact on our five-year forecast.
Okay.
And
All
we
righty.
did start some of those. For example, with
Police officer.
security here, we've already we cut that in December.
Okay,
So
all right.
We have started making some of those that were appropriate to this school year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. That's all I have. I don't think there's any more questions for from the committee members. Thank you, Mrs. Carter. So what we're going to do is let's move down to unfinished business on 4.01, and I think we can look at 3.0, and if we have any questions, we'll follow that up with you, Mr. Treasurer. I don't think we'll have any questions with the board members' event information. No. Right. So we'll go on to point 401, the position reclassification discussion. We're going to give Mrs. Carter just a little time to.
So the position, that's the discussion for the position that we are going to have is based on the legal counsel, labor relations, administrative secretary position that we're requesting the board to consider. This position will support our legal counsel office as well as our labor relations office due to the workload that is in that particular department. And so the need is there as it relates to our legal counsel and the work that's being done there, and then also labor relations in supporting that office where they don't have anyone right now, and it does need to be a confidential secretary because of the work that they're doing within that department.
Okay, so Dr. Molinar, did you have a question?
So to reiterate and as a reminder, so this would be adding a new position, and was that included in the table of all the reductions?
It's included in there as it relates to, it's a negative number as it relates to, as we looked at doing reductions, we did add that in there for future, but we do have positions now that we have not filled that we are hoping that will be considered as relates to allowing us to fill this position, because we haven't filled a current position that that we feel as though this is taking priority over that particular position that we have not filled just yet.
Member Molinar.
Thank you. If this is in that chart and we're adding positions and subtracting positions and all of this is supposed to be done by April, why can't we do this all at once?
And we can. I mean, that was suggested by
Yes.
the Treasurer Department, and that is something that we can look at. I know, Dr. Robinson, did you want to add anything?
Pastor Harris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How many positions are we anticipating that we're going to RIF?
I would have to, give me a second, I can tell you.
Okay.
And while you're looking at that, Dr. Robinson, could you just explain, or Mrs. Carter also, just the urgency of this position? Why you feel there's a need for this position now?
It's due to the current workload of our legal secretary right now, and also the need for the support with the Labor Relations Department, and their capacity to be able to handle what's coming through there. And so they're needing support with doing redactions and just the stuff that they need as it relates to the communication pieces under labor relations as well.
And it also, again, I guess when you look at what happens on a daily basis, because we're having to pay overtime to the employee, that whereas if some of that could be done during normal working hours, we might not have to be paying additional money, but we have to because she's a real legal secretary. So that's her
Job
career before she came to APS. So just trying to make sure, so this person's kind of being a support and split at the same time. So, but in terms of other additional positions, no, we aren't bringing additional positions. This was the only
Other than
one
the general counsel.
Yeah, and we haven't even filled that yet, but we're working on that.
59. And then again, some of it's through attrition and on also positions we've been holding off on because we knew we were going to be at this point, and so we didn't want to hire people and then have to RIF them.
Okay.
Mrs. Carter, could you remind us what the 59 number represents?
Personnel. He asked how many positions were we going to RIF.
59. So here, Madam Chair, here is a dilemma. Here's an issue that I have. And as it is the superintendent's prerogative to bring to us job descriptions. And he brings job descriptions, and we approve a job description, which then looks like it's an unfilled job. And say we approve a general counsel's position, but we haven't voted to hire a general counsel, so that's not an unfulfilled job. That is a job description that we have. So now we are asking to hire a general secretary for that council that we don't have yet. And so it almost puts us in a position of not wanting to vote for any positions unless we're going to hire a person, because we're counting those positions as unfilled positions. And that's kind of a situation where I don't want to vote for anything unless it's going to be filled now.
Well, and point understood, Pastor Harrison. Even if we weren't going to have a general counsel, I would still be bringing this position anyway, given the importance of the position. We are looking at, and I want to make sure we get the right person, so we are looking at those people that have, I'm sorry? Yeah, that have applied. and certainly want to make sure we make the right decision on that. And if necessary, we will open it again until I feel like we have gotten people that we want to bring in to actually interview. We do need to hire a general counsel. There's a great need for it. And I've been sort of holding out on that earlier because we were looking at the budget at that point in time. But then I also look at the needs of the district too. And I know none of it seems to fit perfectly into this puzzle that I would like to see, that it fits and we know we have the money there and all of those things, and we do. But at the same time, I know that in order for us to operate efficiently, because right now we're still operating the way we did 10 and 15 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Member Molinar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hear that we are going to need to make the tough decision to RIF around 59 positions. I also hear that you are saying that there is a great need for a single position, and I learned on your presentation that you have developed a rigorous review process for these positions. So I wonder if this might be an opportunity, if this new position is in need, an opportunity to kind of model or demonstrate the review process so that we can understand that while we're also learning of this new position that is in such need. So I wanted to say that might be an opportunity to pull everything together.
So the process is the position control system within our, is that Munis? Yeah, within Munis. So it's just a process that it goes through, and we would look to see from start to finish in terms of us fiscally being able to do that process, that position, whatever it might be. I mean, it could be a teaching position. It could be a paraprofit position, whatever position it is. The principal, whomever would put it in the system, and then it would move through the process itself. So this, in terms of there being this process that you can, I guess, model this through, you wouldn't see that on this side of the system anyway, because it's going through the electronic system, and we're looking at it, making sure that those positions. So, if it was a teaching position, right? We're looking at class sizes. We're looking at the need for that position. Is it a replacement? So those are things that we would be doing behind the scene before we would even bring it to the board and put on the board doc. So in terms of what I'm thinking you are looking for, you're not going to see that on this side of the system because that's all going electronically. This just happens to be something we're asking for. But typically we're not going to ask for anything because it would go through a system and it might have been rejected before it ever got here.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Okay, if there's no more questions, no more comments, any new business? No more new business to come before the committee, so we will, the Finance and Capital Management Committee meeting will adjourn at 5:38 p.m. Thank you.